Hey guys, Budcat7 here. Okay, it is Sunday, June 28th, 2020, and I want to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. All right, guys, well, we're going to take a look at a very interesting topic here, and it's about a stoneworking technique that is just impossible, and it seems so advanced that it's nearly impossible to imagine that this was done by hand. And there's a lot of questions about this, and it seems to me that their explanations for certain things don't wash. So let's take a look at what they call Mauryan polish. And this is a stoneworking technique, a polishing technique that was developed in the supposed, Indian civilization some 2,000 years ago. And it's often in these Wikipedia articles and other articles from different publications that they write these articles in such a way that it sort of puts all the questionable things at the end instead of giving it to you up front. Like saying, for example, and I mean, I think this is the ethical way of going about it. You can call me crazy, but I think the reason why they do it the way that they do it is because they don't want the reader to be discouraged at the very beginning by thinking that they don't know what they're talking about. So, in my view, when it comes to all these theoretical and hypothetical type evaluations that they give to these things, that should be disclosed right up front, you see. So we know how to read the article in the correct context, you see. What they do is they make this very, scholarly and, very well thought out um, article with the research, et cetera, all the components that you would expect in a scientific article. And at the end, they tell you, we just don't have any idea. But instead of saying, look, we don't understand everything about these things right up front, and that, it's still very theoretical or hypothetical, we're not sure, but here's what we know so far. I don't see any problem with that, see, but we live in a fear based thinking society. Everything in our society requires some sort of fear based thinking. You have to be careful who you're going to offend. You got to be scared that, you're going to lose your job and you're going to do all of this stuff. So it creates a forever sort of collective paranoia where everybody's engaged in this fear based thinking. And what happens with fear based thinking is often many erroneous information is put out there and gathered, and in reality, it's sort of all very disconnected. And that's what happens with fear-based thinking, is that it creates a sort of psychosis where it's impossible for you to get your thoughts together because you're under this constant threat of, something happening because you said or did the wrong thing. So people are like immobilized. They're not free to express themselves in whatever way it is. So let's read about this Mauryan polish, because there are no videos on YouTube that discuss this, in my opinion, impossible stoneworking technique. And then later we're going to take a look at some statues that are so bad, um, that it makes you cringe. Okay, so we're gonna see what we're doing today as compared to what they were doing 2,000 years ago, and there's many questions about this particular subject here, but let's read through it and you judge for yourself. That's all. I mean, first up is one of these capitals from one of these columns that they have there. Okay, this is lion capital here, and as you can see, I mean, it's so well, I mean, it's so perfect. The polishing and all the nooks and crevices in there, it seems impossible that this was done by hand some time ago. So, in the ancient past, 2,000 years, they think, because they're not sure of the chronology. And that's one of the sticky points with this whole subject. But I think a number of things gives it away that these things were found by peoples later on and then adopted into their culture. And, we just have no idea where these things could possibly come from. I mean, can we make a statue, make a capital like this today? Yeah, we put it in a machine. It's cut by laser. It's cut by water jets. It's polished with all kinds of acids and chemicals and blah blah blah. So look, anybody that might do this by hand today, I mean, the cost would be astronomical. It would not be cost friendly to do this kind of stuff. Even if you find somebody with the ability to do it, and we're talking by hand with crude instruments doing these things, not talking about using Dremel tools and all that, because that's what would be done today. They're certainly not taking out a hammer and chisel and doing this stuff. But when you look at these things, it seems next to impossible. Okay, like for example, behind the legs of the lions here, the lion's mane, all these tiny little, lines in it and everything. I mean, you're telling me they polished this to such a high polish, such a high finish, high quality finish with primitive tools? And they say that this technique started in the Neolithic period with the people who are just barely cavemen, coming out of caveman, Paleolithic times. And in Neolithic times, they were doing this kind of stuff. And then you take a look at the crap that we make today, and it's a joke. It's a joke. Okay? It's not, again, this is something that you just they don't want to say, we don't know. Because, when you're in anthropology and archaeology and you say, we don't know, well, then people have a tendency to say, you know what, these people don't know anything. Why should I bother listening to them? But that's their fear-based thinking, is seeing that we're not rational people. I could say, look, this is what we found out about it so far. We're not sure about it, but hey, make up your own mind. We're not allowed to make up our own minds. We have to start with the preconceived narrative of the past and the history, and we just have to accept it, and that's it. I'll tell you what history is, and you follow along with that, and shut your mouth, because you're in school here and we'll tell you what to think, not how to think. So let me read to you about this. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or anything, but again, it's one of these stone working techniques, one of these crafts, one of these skills that are just lost, and it just seems impossible for people to be doing this, especially with such hard stone as, let's say, granite. Okay, Mauryan polish describes one of the frequent characteristics of architecture and sculptures of the Maurya Empire in India, 325 to 185 BCE, which gives a very smooth and shiny surface to the stone material, generally of sandstone or granite, two very different rocks. types of stone, two very different types of stone, especially in hardness. Mauryan polish is found especially in the Ashoka pillars, as well in some constructions like the Barabar caves. The technique did not end with the empire, but continued to be used on occasion up to the 1st or 2nd century AD. They don't know, although the presence of the polish sometimes complicates dating, as with the Dagon Yakshi, which is a statue of a woman. According to the archaeologist John Marshall, the extraordinary precision and accuracy which characterizes all Mauryan works, and which has never, we venture to say, been surpassed even by the finest workmanship on Athenian buildings. Okay, so even Greek sculptures could not surpass, Greek craftsmen could not surpass this skill level. Polished Barabar caves. The Barabar caves are the first known and dated example of Mauryan polish, since they were dedicated by Ashoka in several inscriptions in the year 12 and the year 19 of his reign. Okay, so when were those inscriptions put on there? Okay, did they know? They give the date of that, so it's just all assumptions. Again, folks, 95% of this sort of investigative science is completely theoretical and hypothetical. There's so many holes in there. It's got more holes than a block of Swiss cheese. So just you always have to take this with a grain of salt. The caves are carved out of granite and extremely hard rock, then finished with a very nice polishing of the inner surface, giving a mirror effect of a great flatness as well as an echo effect. This large-scale polish directly evokes polishing on smaller surfaces of the Maurya statuary, particularly visible on the pillars and capitals of the pillars of Ashoka. This know-how seems to have disappeared again after the Maurya period. None of the subsequent caves, such as the Ajanta caves, having this characteristic of polished surfaces. At Barabar caves, some caves were dedicated through inscription by Ashoka, the caves of the Barabar group, as well as by his grandson and successor, Dasaratha Maurya. The caves of the Nagarjuna group, both group of caves have perfectly polished walls, which suggests that polishing techniques were not exclusive to Ashoka and continue at least for some time after his reign. Later caves. After the Barabar caves, the polishing of cave walls was abandoned, never to be revived, despite the huge efforts at building Buddhist and Jain caves until the 6th century CE. Such grandiose caves as Karla caves, 1st century CE, or the Ajanta caves, 5th century CE, do not have any polishing either. So later caves don't have this polishing. Again, look, folks, I know this is a hard concept to grasp for most people, even people in the alternative community, okay? We are led to believe by our education that the further we go into the past, the less sophisticated peoples were, okay? So here's a new concept for you, okay? The further you go into the past, the more advanced people were, okay? I know that's shocking to some people, and it's not supposed to be that way because, okay, apparently all these cavemen running around polishing granite and cutting it with, copper chisels and stone tools, making the Olmec heads with stone tools and all sorts of ridiculous nonsense that they hand us and we're supposed to believe because they have no other explanation for it. It's got to fit the narrative and the timeline and the progression from, knuckle dragging cavemen in the past all the way up to us sophisticated people today who make statues that are so bad that they're cringeworthy. Okay, that's how advanced we are now. Ugh. Okay. This may be due to the fact that the Mauryan caves were dedicated and sponsored by the Mauryan imperial government, allowing for huge resources, spelled wrong, I think, and efforts to be spent Whereas later cases where essentially the where were the essentially the result of donations by individuals who could not afford as high a level of spending. Okay, so it cost a lot of money to do that work back then, and today it's so cost onerous that's impossible. You have people that would make all these Greek type temples with all the statues in them. It cost like billions and billions of dollars to do all this stuff. But people just knocking it off back then like nothing. See, that's what you're supposed to believe because they were all cavemen doing it too, or next to cavemen. The pillars of Ashaka made of sandstone generally also exhibit a high level of Mauryan polish. Here again, the mirror-like polish has generally been considered as an important import from the Near East, but some authors now consider the Sunbandar caves might constitute a precedent and an evolutionary step to this type of polish, although these caves are generally dated to a much later period. So you can see how confused they are about this subject, you see. So here's where it starts to break down a little bit. And in a way, the rest of this article should just go like this. Because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Okay. All known Mauryan pillars have the characteristic mirror-like polish, although most were left unpolished over the surface of the bottom part meant to be buried in the ground, which is an assumption. Some of the capitals of the pillars of Ashaka exhibit mirror-like polish, such as the Sarnath and the Sanchi capitals, while others don't and only have a smooth surface, the Sankissa capital or the Rampur bull elephant. This, together with the epigraphical considerations, have even led some authors to question if these non-polished capital might be of a time prior to Ashaka. Again, more head scratching. These non-polished pillars are also those that displays the highest level of Hellenistic influence. In the case of the Rampurva bull or the Sankasa elephant, the abacus is composed of honeysuckles alternated with stylized palmettes and small rosettes. A similar kind of design can be seen in the frieze of the lost capital of the Allahabad pillar. These designs likely originated in Greek and Near Eastern arts. If you believe any of their story, okay, they're not sure and this and that, and probably and possibly and maybe and could be. This is all language, okay? I've read it to you from the research that I've done in many different scientific papers, archaeological papers, William A. Ritchie of New York State, and everything is possibly and probably and maybe and may seem and could be and possibly. It's just all of those words do not connote certainty. You realize that, right? Do you realize this type of language that's used with things that are theoretical and hypothetical? All of the words used in there to describe all these things do not connote certainty. Okay? You have to understand these things before you even read these things. So you, at the end of this, can take it all with a grain of salt. All right. And talking about these abacuses and stuff, we're going to look at some more of this work, a little bit of it anyway. And it's just impossible for them to be polishing it. What do they do with Q-tips in there? How the heck, And as far as what you can find on YouTube, this Indian fella goes through it and he talks about it. Apparently, they polished it with fruit juices or whatever it is, which the whole concept is ridiculous. Okay, even if they made a mild acid of it, that mild acid wouldn't do anything to granite if you made it out of fruit. Okay, you can only make some very mild acids out of that stuff. And he says it was done with fruit or whatever. Meanwhile, this is completely unlistenable. There's sort of incoherent blather going on in there, and then nobody else discusses this subject at all. Okay, so they're saying it likely originated there. Likely, again, the language of hypothesis, okay, the language of theory, okay, the language of hypothetical opinions is likely originated. Likely? Well, come on now. Mauryan statuary. There are many examples of polished stone statuettes and artifacts from the Mauryan period. One of them, the Masar lion discovered near Patna, is special in that its style is nearly completely Archimedean, which suggests a high level of artistic influence from Western Asia at the time the statuette was made. And always these things have to go in certain directions, from here to there and there to here. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense with their cockamamie timeline that's purely theoretical. The Masar lion, discovered near Pataliputra and dated to the 3rd century BCE, is carved in sandstone of the Kunar type, like the Ashoka pillars, and its finished is polished. The sculptural style is also indisputably Archimedean. This is particularly visible with the well-ordered tubular representation of whiskers, vibrisses, and the geometrical representation of the inflated veins flush with the whole face. And again, look, if you know anything about this, you've looked at videos here on YouTube or researched it online or whatever it is, not really sure what the Greek culture or even the time periods involved or anything like that, because history is a complete blur. We can't be sure of anything beyond that of like 200 years ago. We're so busy obfuscating our own history today, okay, and filtering out all the bad stuff and everything. Look, I had a friend, acquaintance. He was becoming a history professor, and it was very interesting to me. They gave him this book, okay, about how history is viewed in all these different biased perspectives. Okay, either romanticized or pedantic or whatever it is. All these different sort of biased um, perceptions of history that have to be considered when you teach history. And these are the sort of things you're going to learn in university, but you're certainly not going to learn these things in primary school. They don't need you to. You need to go out there and turn the wheels of the machine like a good little obedient servant, and that's it. We don't need you to know anymore. And if you do, you're going to figure out that we don't really know what we're talking about anyway. Okay, so the mane, on the other hand, with the tufts of hair represented in ripples, is rather naturalistic. Okay, so caveman back with 2,000 and 3,000 years ago, all doing this very fine work and everything, and guys running around in sandals and grass skirts and stuff like that, and barely wearing clothes and whatnot. Okay, we're all led to believe these cockamamie ideas about the past because they have no other way to describe it, because they have to regurgitate all the blather that they learned in the university, which is, as H.L. Mencken said, if you want to if students want to improve their education, what they should do is burn down all the campuses and hang all the professors. And geometrical, okay. So according to S.P. Gupta, these stylistic characteristics can be described as non-Indian. So you have these non-Indian type stylized sculptures in India, and okay, so you know there's more evidence of these things were already there when these people found them, and they have no other way to attribute it because the timeline goes in a certain way and it stops for a certain time, and everybody's, wearing bear skins and throwing flint spears and all that kind of stuff. It is possible that the sculpture was made by an Achaemenid or Greek sculptor in India and either remained without effect or was the Indian imitation of a Greek or Achaemenid model somewhere between the 5th and 1st century BCE. And I think they're referring to Archimedes, although it is generally dated from the time of the Maurya Empire around the 3rd century BC. You see, so that they don't have the dating right. We'll attribute it to the 5th and 1st century BC, although it's generally dated from the around 3rd. It's between the 5th and 1st, and somewhere there, because it says somewhere, right? So it's generally in there, 3rd BC, they think. Okay, they don't know, but they think. According to John Boardman, the lion sculpture of Marsar is quote unquote quite Persian, although the treatment of the mane is rather of Greek naturalistic style and breaks with the rigid and codified style of the Achaemenid Empire. For for him, the lions of the lion capital of Shaka at Sarnath represent the next logical and artistic step, and would be the realization of Hellenistic Greek artists so often to give more naturality to Persian style. So the Achaemenid is Persian. It's Persian. Okay. And look, the Persians and they all went into India. The Arabs went into India later on, and they say if that's the way the timeline goes, I don't know. So, and we don't know. For him, the lines of the lion capital of Ashaka at Sarnath represent the next logical and artistic step, and would be the realization of Hellenistic Greek artists to soften and give more naturality to the Persian style. There are also a few examples of polished statuary, all dated to the Mauryan period, such as the polished sculpture of a head from Sarnath. The diamond throne of Bodh Gaya is another example. It was established by Ashaka at Bodh Gaya and also exhibits the characteristic Mauryan polish. Polished ring stones are variously said to be Mauryan or Sunga, dating ranging for the 3rd century BCE or the 1st century BCE, whichever one, take your pick. And it shows some of these things here, and some of this work is just defies. He's a polished surface of this thing, and how that happened in all those nooks and crevices and crannies. With fruit juice, I doubt it. And here's the Dargaj Yakshi, which is this statue here, is generally considered as one of the finest examples of Mauryan art. Alternatively, is rather dated to the 2nd century CE, based on the analysis of the shape and ornamentation. According to some art historians, the treatment of the forelock in particular is said to be characteristically Kushan. Okay, so 6 of one, half a dozen the other, call it what you will. They're basing it on whatever they learned, their crummy false history and everything else that goes along with it. Okay, this is why you have to take all of this stuff with a grain of salt. Okay. After the Mauryan period, the general sculpture trend is towards the complete abandonment of polishing techniques. This may be due to the high cost involved with polishing. The end of the Mauryan period marked the end of imperial patronage of the arts, which thereafter tended to be financed by the people of the wealthy merchant class thereafter. There are, however, a few important cases of polishing that seem to subsist. Okay, so they're saying that it was all, cost prohibitive and all kind of stuff like that, and this is why it was abandoned. Nobody ever did it again. And this is contrary to our whole knowledge of the procession of mankind and his, technical advancements, scientific advancements, craft skills, whatever it is. It doesn't make any sense. You're going to abandon a more sophisticated technique for a less sophisticated one in the future. It doesn't make any sense. You see, the Dijar Ganj Yakshi, although claimed the Parkam Yaksha of Mandabara is made of polished gray sandstone in the same material as the pillars of Ashaka. This statue is generally dated to the 3rd, 1st century BC, somewhere in there, and may be immediately post-Mauryan. It may be this, it may be that, it could be, it possibly is. Look, this is how it goes, folks. Remember all of these wording, okay? People on the other side of the argument, somehow they don't see any of those words. They only see facts. They don't see, even the academics here won't even go that far. Only the people who defend them, see, they're delusional, right, and crazy. It may be a transition from the Mauryan period to the next period, including the release of Barhut, presenting some continuity in the finishing technique, but a real fracture in terms of sculptural style. The Didoganj Yakshi, although claimed by some to be as an example of Mauryan art, is generally dated to the 2nd century CE based on the analysis of shape and ornamentation. This life-size standing image is tall, well-proportioned, freestanding sculpture is made of sandstone with well-polished surface. The statue, if the 2nd century date is upheld, would suggest that polishing technique, in fact, did not disappear with the Mauryans, but remained in India and was simply little used, possibly because of the high labor and cost involved, and maybe some of the machinery that they were using from the ancient past there, and it came out of the ancient past, was starting to break down, and didn't have any way of replacing it because the world was destroyed so many times. And, look, folks, even on the History Choke channel over there, they say that in 10,000 years, there wouldn't be a trace of New York City if it was abandoned today. So 10,000 years from now, there wouldn't be a trace, not a trace of New York City. That's what they say, all right? And we have all these things left over from the ancient past. Somehow they didn't go away, but all our modern stuff would. Debate on Achaemenid versus pre-Mauryan origins. Achaemenid sculptural art is often characterized by a great level of polishing of the stone, usually sandstone, a very hard material. Okay, so I have a problem with this, sandstone being a very hard material. Okay, and as far as I know, okay, sandstone is a soft material. Okay, soft material. Okay, in one article they say it's hard, and in another article they say it's soft. All right. Any cases about sandstone, they don't even know how sandstone is put together. They have theories about the cement that glues the sandstone together. They don't. So I don't know where it is exactly, but in another article here, I'd love to show it to you, where they say sandstone is a very soft stone. So, look, make up your minds. It's either soft or hard. I mean, this is the whole thing. It's just completely confusing. All right? Now, sandstone is very hard to work. It's hard and it's very hard to work. In another article, it's soft. It's very easy to work. Make up your frickin' minds. All right? It's thought that this polishing influenced the Mauryan polishing as visible in the architecture of the columns at Pataliputra. Sandstone is very hard to work, so it's believed that polishing was obtained by the use of emery grains. So it's believed. Okay, so in any case, stones and polishing grains have been found in the ruins of Persepolis. These polishing techniques were also used by the Greeks, who used the natural Naxos emery grains. Okay, they say whatever, even if Greece is from the time period that they say it was, maybe it's not. It is believed that the stone making techniques employed by the Mauryans may have derived from the techniques of Achaemenid statuary, stoneworking, and polishing techniques having spread to India after the destruction of the empire by Alexander the Great in 330 BCE, and the displacement of Persian and Perso-Greek artists and technicians. Okay, so they saw examples of the Achaemenid art and the polishing, etc., but way less sophisticated as that stuff found in India. Okay, so here they say, according to Gupta, the polishing of rocks could have a local origin. He invokes the existence of polishing technologies of the Neolithic, okay, when they mostly were running around with flint spears, etc., etc. Visible in various stone tools such as axes. There is, however, no trace of evolution from these Neolithical tools to polished stone architecture. And the Barabar caves are essentially a sudden technological break with no local history, suggesting that the import of these techniques from another culture. Well, which one? Nor are there any known examples of stone architecture in India before the Maurya period. According to Gupta, the son of Badar caves could be such an intermediate stage, relatively unique, and subject to questioning its chronology, since it generally dated to the 2nd and 4th century CE. The polish was achieved by application of agate burnisher, which was later applied on pillars and sandstone objects. Well, this guy says it was done with fruits. Okay, this is from 2020, May 31st, 2020. He's done with fruits. Okay, if you can believe that. Of course, there was no advanced civilization in the past. That's ridiculous to think any of that, because there couldn't have been a more advanced civilization than ours in the past, because, that's just the way it is. Even though the world is so old that there could have been a dozen civilizations like ours in the past, it's completely wiped off the face of the earth by something they call like the Ice Age, which is nonsense, never existed. Something happened 11,500 years ago, but it wasn't the Ice Age. It was something else. The policy, okay, so some examples of Indus Valley civilization statuary do show a certain level of polishing. This is going back to 3000 to 2000 BCE. Okay, so way back they were doing that. Palapura Bhaskar fragment made from great stone, like granite stone, or I don't know, discovered by K.P. Jaswal, had Mauryan polish, was dated to pre-Mauryan Nanda period due to three archaic Brahmi letters which paleographically appeared before Mauryan period Brahmi. The Bhaskar has been analyzed to be part of a trefoil arc which decorated a Tirana gate. Okay, so more anomalous things in the past. They can't get it right. They don't know the chronology, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that was the article on the Mauryan polish there. And let me go back to the Ashoka columns because I just want to take a look at the pillars of Ashoka here. They show some other stuff in here. Okay. And let's take a look here. I'm not reading it. I'm just showing you some of the stuff. Look at this floral design in here. Okay. Let's look at close look at this. All right. So apparently it's not even a clear picture, a clear image, because I don't think they want you to get a clear image, folks. This is with the abacus on the bottom. You see this part of it? This is an abacus. My grandfather worked with an Asian fella, Chinese fella, that did not use a little Texas Instrument calculator at all. He used an abacus. My grandfather took me into his office one day and showed me, talking with the guy. When I walked into the office, he was using the abacus, and he was using it so fast. I couldn't believe how fast. This guy was making calculations with the abacus there. This is in a New York Life office, New York Life Insurance office on Long Island. Okay. I go up into the office there, and he introduces me to his Asian friend. And the guy's using the abacus like at 1,000,000 miles an hour. God only knows how many calculations he was making. So look at the intricacy of this thing. Okay, this was done by people so primitive, and they polished it all up with this emery stuff, emery dust and whatnot. That wherever they got it from. Okay, and it's ancient and everything. So they got the polish behind all this stuff. They carved all this stuff behind it somehow with brass tools or maybe even iron tools. How are you going to do that? How are you going to get behind all of these things to carve these things? It's impossible. We're just supposed to take it for granted, and that's it. All right. And Sylvia on New Earth goes through some of these things in many of her videos and shows many of these statues that just seem impossible to be carved and polished like that in ancient times or so many years ago. Okay, and here's all the capitals. Apparently they were taken down and moved all over the place, and they don't know how they erected them. They assume that they were done like they did the obelisk in Egypt. Okay, somebody did an experiment with a 25-ton one, and guys, again, with these experiments and all that kind of stuff, they did one experiment with 25-ton obelisk, and they were able to erect it on the third attempt, whatever it is. Okay, we're talking about obelisks there that they were cutting out all over the place that were 1,000 tons, 700 tons. Okay, it's one thing to do it with a 25-ton one, but how the heck did they do it with 750-ton, 1,000-ton, more than 1,000-ton, et cetera, et cetera? Okay, with sheer manpower alone, but evidently it was done. But who's to say that's the method? And I've gone over that on this channel. People come up with ingenious ideas about how they did these things. Dozens and dozens and dozens of them. okay? One seems just as ingenious as the next. Which one should we pick? And the third thing about it is you have to understand that people are coming up with ideas that no human being in history ever thought of before. They're their own original ideas. That's how inventions are made. They're all people's own original ideas. Well, just like inventions can be made with own original ideas, well, techniques used to do things can be done with own original ideas. All right. So you always have to consider that. I don't care who says they got whatever solved. They've said they've run those articles about everything, how the Egyptian pyramids were built, how these things were carved, all this kind of stuff, again and again and again and again. Solve, 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 solve. Every single one of these things it's solved, but they're all different. So which one should I pick? Okay, besides the fact that people are coming up with their own original ideas. You have to keep that in mind. That, yeah, they might have done it that way. Who knows? They might have done it any of the ways that these people think about. And many people think about these things, and there are dozens and dozens, if not hundreds and thousands, of ingenious methods and ways that people could have done it. And I guarantee you that 90% of them are people's own original ideas that no human being in history has ever thought of them before. Okay? That's how it is. Because that's when they say, well, we solved it and it's how they did it. They even have the wherewithal themselves to say, well, that's how they could have done it, because they could have done it any number of ways. And they know that. It's the people who defend these people who say it's a fact, when it's not a fact. Not even to the people who are archaeologists and anthropologists, it's not a fact. But the people who defend them, who are these idiots who are sitting in their big fat tushies on a chair in front of a computer or read books or whatever it is, they miss all those words in there. Probably, possibly, maybe, could be. They miss all of those words in there, and it somehow comes out as fact. Okay? It's not fact. Okay, it's a lot of theories and suppositions and, opinion and perception and everything else. Here's the thing here. See if we get a better picture of it. No better picture of it. Why not? I mean, the 35 millimeter camera's been around for like 100 years or something like that. You can take perfect pictures with it, but not this one. Yeah, we don't want you to see that one too close, right? Anyway, guys, let's go to the statues that are so bad, because this is entertaining, actually. So this is what our abilities are today. Somehow these people back then could make such statues that are unbelievable, like this one, for example. Okay? Right? So let's take some real super good ones from today. 12 cringeworthy statues of famous people that look nothing like them. And it's a lot of ads and stuff. I'm sorry about that, but whatever, we'll get through it. Come on. Come on. Okay, so two terrifying larger than life terracotta busts of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. I mean, people are going to say, artists will say, well, these are highly stylized and everything. They're not supposed to be, perfect statues, precision work, et cetera, et cetera. But why not? They were doing it 2,000 years ago. They were knocking them out like nobody's business. But today we can't do that. Here's one of Melania Trump made out of wood and a chainsaw. Okay, well, that you shouldn't expect much from. Real ugly. Not very complimentary there. Okay. Cristiano Ronaldo's bust was mercilessly mocked on social media. Oh, yeah, it's horrible. Absolutely horrible. Looks deformed. We're doing fine work here, guys. Lucille Ball statue looks like an I Love Lucy demon. Okay, it's horrible. Just horrible. They honor these people with these pieces of garbage, okay? But, people in the Neolithic period were running around making fine instruments and fine tools and weapons and statues and everything else. Okay. They were, but they certainly weren't doing it with what they say they did. This Oscar Wilde statue looks like the swamp creature. Yeah, that's a beauty. Well, again, they'll say, well, he's just highly stylized or whatever, but I can imagine taking like Lady Gaga, his James Dean at the Griffith Observatory. He could use some eyes, and he looks kind of weird. Very nice and well done, but odd and not natural and kind of scary. Kate Moss was oddly immortalized in the shape of a pretzel, and it looks just unbelievable and disgusting. Horrible. British Museum in London. They like that kind of horror show over there, those inbred blue bloods. Elvis Presley's statue looks like he's falling asleep while choosing something. It's awful, awful. I'm a big Elvis fan. That's an insult to Elvis, even though he was a drug addict and a drunk and fat. Alfred Hitchcock's giant bust is unrecognizable. Well, it sort of looks like him, man. I sort of could tell it, or it's even the sort of a sleepy Olmec head made out of wood or something like that. Who knows? Horrible. The statue of Michael Jackson in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, making an awkward pose, and it looks very strange too. Not good and just weird. Doesn't give him credit either, whether you like him or not. Johnny Depp's statue looks lifeless and old. I guess I don't know. Looks like a wax museum statue or something like that. Terracotta warrior Andy Murray, tennis player, was turned into a lot more squat than the real deal. Oh, it's just awful, just awful. I tell you, a lot of artists are just, they're not completely crazy, just a little crazy. Okay, so anyway, that was the whole thing. This is the kind of crap that we can make today. Okay, could you imagine they could take like Lady Gaga and make like something like this out of her whole dress and all the get up that she puts on and all the cockamamie crap that she uses on her dress and everything? You think they can make it like this today? Well, why not? Okay, yeah, you can put it in a tank with lasers or water pressure to make like a whole computer program to make it. But I'm talking about making it by hand. Okay, with just general hand tools and all kind of stuff. Okay, it seems next to impossible. Okay, and you don't see that level of carving and whatever today at all anywhere. So have we progressed? I mean, have we evolved higher standards in the quality and workmanship of craft and these techniques, etc.? Well, it doesn't seem to be. But again, guys, there's a whole different story to the past than we're led to believe. Okay, and if anything, these Mauryan polish here, all right, doesn't make any sense in the way they tell it, and they can't work out the details. They don't. These The thing is this is one thing they said here. Okay, that I have a problem with. The inscriptions were made over the polish. All known Mauryan pillars have the characteristic mirror-like polish, although most were left unpolished over the surface of the bottom. Okay, that was the one part to be met in the ground, which I don't believe. Something happened down there that we don't know about. Inscriptions were made over the polished finish with the ungainly result that the polished stone is chipped around the letters. Okay, so you polish this whole thing, and then you decided afterwards to put in the letters, and it cracked up all the finish and everything. And you were smart enough and skilled enough to do this whole finish, and God only knows what work it took. And then afterwards, you decide, you know what? I forgot to put all the stuff on here. Let's put it on. Look, guys. The stories they're telling us is nothing but nonsense. Half the inscriptions in Egypt were all put on those stones that were found there by the rulers and pharaohs of the later dynasties, whatnot. These early dynasties, they don't even know anything about it. All the stuff they tell us about them is all BS. Okay, and here's one of these things which shows that these things were probably standing in place when these people found them, and then they went ahead and put all these inscriptions on them and wrecked them. Okay, and wrecked any forensic evidence that we might need to figure out what was going on in the past. Okay, so here's another problem I have with this Mauryan polish thing, or that they don't know where it comes from, how old it is, the chronology. There's some from later, there's some from thousands of years ago. look, they're all over the map on this, guys. It seems highly improbable that primitive people in the past could do such finer work than we're capable of doing today without lasers and computers and high water pressure machines. Okay? So just think about it, guys. It's another one of these stoneworking techniques that just seems impossible. Impossible. Just as I said, you look at this thing right here and you got to say to yourself, how the heck did they do that? And how would we even do it today? It's impossible. Okay? What was on the column there? All right? It's just impossible. But they wanted to lead us to believe that it's all just fine and well and everything's great. All right? And, that one with the unclear picture there, and the shock of pillars there of that carving with the abacus. And why isn't it a clear photograph, my friends? Why? Certainly capable of taking a clear photograph. Why are they not? All right, you have to ask yourself these questions. All right. So anyway, guys, I hope you liked the video. I'm producing these videos one after another because my app is going to run out pretty soon. I have to pay for it on a monthly basis, whatever. I just don't have the money to do it, so I might have to do some short videos in the future until I pay for it again. So anyway, guys, if you like the video, please hit the like button, and if you're not subscribed, please do subscribe. And I'll be getting back with a video for you real soon, and don't worry, we'll take care of everything in the future too. All right. Anyway, guys, Budcat7 signing off. A peace.